7,000 languages. One massive puzzle. Most people think the best way to sort them is by history, the classic language family tree. But history only takes us so far. What happens when a language in South America behaves exactly like one in Northern Asia, despite being thousands of miles and centuries apart? To solve that, we use linguistic typology, the science of classifying languages by their features, not their ancestors. A typology is a classification used to organize things according to similar or dissimilar characteristics. This is often found in archaeology or botany, but also in linguistics. Linguistic typology is the field of linguistics that classify languages by their structural and grammatical features rather than by historical origin. Just like you can organize plants based on different characteristics, languages can also be classified. Linguistics typology focuses on identifying grammatical patterns that are common across various languages, as well as those that are uncommon. From there, how do we even organize our 7,000 languages? Well, there are actually a lot of ways to do that, and we're going to use an amazing tool to get an idea of how this can be done: the World Atlas of Language Structures, or WALS, which is the acronym I will use. The WALS is a large database of structural properties like phonological, grammatical, lexical of languages. 55 authors contributed to it. Their website provides us ways to see how languages around the globe can be organized according to different features. It's an amazing collection and a perfect example to understand language typology. Languages around the world have so many different characteristics, but they can have a lot in common as well. And we can find a lot of shared characteristics and ways to organize these characteristics. Take word order, for example. There can only be 6 general categories, maybe 7. This is because word order is based on the subject, the verb, and the object of a sentence. Here we have 3 different items, which leads to a combination of only 6 categories. 7 if you include languages that have a free word order, meaning they don't have a default word order and words can move around freely. Word order is one of the most common ways to organize languages around the world, and it's quite practical to get a quick idea of what a language typology can look like. In a typology, we have categories and subcategories. And it's no different in linguistics. Our word order categories can be subdivided too, or organized differently. Instead of focusing on subject, object, and verb, we can focus more specifically on the order of only the object and the verb, or just the subject and the verb. This more defined focus is actually practical because it gives us a bit more details, and it is sometimes even more relevant for specific languages than talking about the 3 at once. We can also look into the word order of nouns and adjectives too to organize our languages. Sure, some languages may have the same general word order, but what about their nouns and adjectives? In English, adjectives are usually put before the noun. But in French, it's the other way around. This gives us another layer of information to classify languages. So far, we have looked into organizing languages based on their syntax, meaning how words are organized in a sentence. We can also organize them based on other linguistic features, such as their sounds. Doing so, we focus on the phonology of languages. Organizing languages based on their sounds and phonemes can lead to a lot of categories. Let's try to look at that. As I said, there are a lot of potential categories when we look into phonology and sounds. For example, we could organize our languages based on if they have tones or not. This one is quite interesting because you can see a pattern where most tonal languages are located: warmer and humid climates. This actually led to a controversial paper, Climate, Vocal Folds, and Tonal Languages, Connecting the Physiological and Geographic Dots by Caleb Everett, Damien Blasey, and Sean Roberts. In this paper, the authors argue that humid and warm climates make it easier to use tones in a language, and that's why most of them are located in this type of climate. The explanation given by this paper has been dismissed by many linguists, and it's simply a hypothesis, not a fact. But this is a bit beyond this video. Let's go back into our typology. All the common ways to organize our languages rely on the consonants and vowels of a language. We could organize all languages based on the presence of specific consonants or specific vowels. That means we can organize all languages based on the absence of common consonants or the presence of uncommon consonants. This is where things can get interesting, because the notion of common or uncommon consonant may seem vague. How do we know what is common and uncommon? Actually, to be able to do that, we do need to compare many languages to get a general idea, which is a form of organizing languages, so just another form of typology. The very nature of this task is essential for a typology. This can also lead us to a more in-depth organization of languages based on phonology. We could organize our languages based on their consonant-to-vowel ratio, or how words are stressed across languages. We could also look into what languages have vowel nasalization, or the rhythm type in the language. All of these examples are found on the WALS, and they can also be combined together to refine how we can organize our 7,000 languages. By the way, if you like linguistics and languages, you can subscribe to this channel where I frequently upload videos on these topics. Besides how words are organized in sentences or the sounds they have, we can also look into the morphology of languages around the world. Morphology is the study of morphemes, the smallest units of meaning in a language. It can be a simple noun, or how the plural is marked, like adding an S in English. We could, for example, organize our 7,000 languages based on how morphemes are organized. There are two main categories for that. A language can be analytic or synthetic. An analytic language tends to have each morpheme as its own unit, separated from the rest. Affixes, morphemes that are attached to a word to change its meaning, are not really used. On the other hand, a synthetic language tends to frequently add affixes to words. Realistically speaking, there are no language that is purely analytic or synthetic. That's why each branch has more sub-branches to organize languages. For an analytic language, the main sub-branch is isolating languages, which tend to not have many affixes, but still some. Two common examples include Vietnamese, spoken in Asia, and Yoruba, spoken in Africa. To simplify the situation, in these languages, one word has one meaning, and then another word has its own meaning and so on. And we can make a whole sentence. On the other hand, the synthetic branch has more sub-branches, such as fusional or agglutinative languages, among others. The main difference is how many affixes are used and how sentences end up being constructed. A very synthetic language could lead to a whole sentence being only one word. This word will have a lot of affixes carrying the meaning of the sentence. That would be our main difference. A sentence composed of many words, analytic, versus a sentence of one word with many affixes, synthetic. Usually, languages fall in between these two extremes, and that's how we can organize them. Besides that, we can also organize our languages based on specific morphemes used. For example, we can organize languages by the presence of grammatical gender. Grammatical genders are quite common across languages in the world, and we can then organize languages in two categories, whether they have this feature or not. But let's be honest, it's a bit boring and simple. I'd say we can go further to make it more interesting. See, some languages may have the classic masculine versus feminine grammatical gender, but they may also have more. For example, a neutral gender, called neuter, like in German, but there's actually more than this dichotomy, masculine versus feminine. We saw the neuter category, but there's also a common versus neuter distinction. This is something found in Danish and Swedish, for example, and it's just another way to organize nouns. There is also one of my favorites, animate versus inanimate. This is found in many Native American languages, like Ojibwe or Navajo, for example. Nouns are distinguished based on if they refer to something alive or not. What I love is that sometimes something that we may consider inanimate may end up being classified as animate in a language. So, our typology can organize languages with these categories, but we can even add more subcategories. Some languages present both an animate versus inanimate distinction, as well as a feminine versus masculine distinction. We could also organize our languages based on how ordinal numerals are formed, or if the language presents a system of reduplication, which is, if you don't know, using the same word twice to express the plural. One example is tree versus forest. Two words are used to distinguish between one tree and many trees. But a language with reduplication could say tree versus tree to distinguish between one tree and a forest. We could also organize everything based on how negations are formed. For example, with the presence of one word, or a double negation, or even a triple negation. Another common way is to organize languages based on the presence or not of a grammatical case system. And if there is one, how many cases and which ones are used. English has no case system, but a language like Russian has multiple cases, used to express who the subject is, who the object is, or who is the beneficiary of an action, meaning someone who received the action. With these different examples of common ways to organize languages, we can see that there can be many ways to organize all the languages in the world. We can start in a broad manner by looking at either the syntax, the morphology, or the phonology of a language, and we can then refine into specific aspects of these domains. We can also combine multiple things from these categories to categorize languages. Before ending this video, I want to talk about something that linguistic typology can help us achieve: understanding linguistic universals. Linguistic universals are grammatical rules, features, or patterns found in all, or at least most natural human languages, reflecting shared cognitive structures. By trying to see what features are present in a language or not, we can see when something seems to be common to everyone, leading to describing a feature as a universal. Universals can either be absolute, meaning that every documented language exhibits these characteristics, or statistical, meaning that this characteristic is seen in most languages or is probable in most languages. The thing is, not everyone agrees on this concept. Nicholas Evans and Stephen Levinson are two linguists who have opposed the notion of linguistic universals. They believe that among the 6,000 to 8,000 languages currently spoken worldwide, there are only significant tendencies rather than true universals at most. To end our discussion on linguistic universals, there is also another concept that emerges from that: the implicational hierarchy. This concept relies on the fact that in some languages, to have a feature X, you need to have feature Y. A common example is that dual pronouns can only exist with the plural. You have the singular, one person, the plural, many people, and sometimes languages have a dual system, meaning two people. To have this dual system, you need the existence of a plural. If there is no plural in the language, the dual system will not be present. The implicational hierarchy is then the following: singular is required for the plural, which is required for a dual system. Singular, plural, dual. But I feel like this should be the topic of a dedicated video. I believe this is it for today, and I will see you in the next video.